US President Joe Biden says he just had a bad night in the first debate with Donald Trump, but not many people, as you can hear, are convinced. Joining me is Professor of Political Science at Cyprus College, Peter Matthews. Hello, Peter. It seems
Hello,
like
Tim.
Joe Biden has to go.
I'll tell you, there's increasing calls for that, and you should look at some numbers here. 72% of the voters prefer another candidate instead of Biden for the Democratic ticket. And it's quite interesting that President Obama and leaders like top leaders like Obama and Clyburn, Congressman Clyburn and Nancy Pelosi have not called for him to go or be replaced. But there are many other people who are in Congress, 5 members of Congress, and a lot of other Democratic donors, including the chair of Netflix, who's a big donor of the Democratic Party. These folks are also calling directly for him to step down as candidate and to let someone else replace him. There was one other interesting development, and the Nate Silver of 538, a website that's very well known and respected, has actually called for President Biden to step down as president and let Vice President Kamala Harris take over right now. And now we should have a head start and be able to campaign as president and name her own vice president. And that should be an interesting development. That already happens, but there is a lot of calls now, especially after the debate and the interview. After the debate, Biden actually is 6 points behind President Trump right now, after the debate. And after the interview, it hasn't come up much from that at all. But Vice President Harris is 2 points behind Trump, so she's much closer, more competitive.
One of the things that really concerned me in that interview, Peter, and that interview obviously was positioned to try and convince people that he was fine, is when he said, oh, all you can do is your best. Well, that's not really what it's about here, is it? It's not about what he can do as his best. It's about what the Democrats can do to win the election.
Absolutely, Tim. And that was very concerning to a lot of people when he said, they asked him, what happens in January if you've lost the election? How would you feel? And he said, well, as long as I could do my best and say I've done my best, that should be okay. But that's not actually okay. The Democrats want to win the election in this crucial time when President Trump is actually ahead of President Biden by several points. So that answer was not very reassuring to many people.
What about Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, the possibility of Michelle Obama? It doesn't seem like that's going to happen.
I don't think it is, Tim, because of a couple of things. If you open it up to an open convention where people like Whitmer and Gavin Newsom and others have to compete with Vice President Harris and even Michelle Obama, and that's a whole different story, but if the others have to compete with them on the floor of the convention, it could be very divisive. That's happening at the end of August, so that means there'll be very little time left for whoever actually gets the nomination, and a very divided party to back them. On the other hand, if Biden, let's say, actually resigns and endorses Vice President Harris right now, or lets her be the president for right now, that would be much more streamlined for Democrats to be able to go forward and take forward the strongest foot forward. So we'll have to wait and see. But I don't think the other ones are going to happen. Where as far as the other candidates, they all are behind in the polling. They're behind Trump by several points, much more than Harris is. For example, if you look at Whitmer's numbers, she's about 4% behind Trump, and Newsom is about 5 or 6% behind Trump, whereas Harris is much closer. So I think there's something to be seen that Vice President Harris has been playing major league ball. She's been in the major leagues. The other folks are actually haven't been experienced in that area, which is very crucial right now.
Well, you're in the box seat. You work in this subject and area day in, day out in the United States. What's your take, Peter? Can he survive? It doesn't seem, look outside looking in, it doesn't seem like he can because of the groundswell of energy now moving inside the Democratic Party.
I believe you're right, Tim. I think it's going to be very difficult for him to be able to hang on because don't forget that that debate was watched by 51 million people across the country. And the interview with ABC was only watched by far fewer people. So the impression from the debate was that he didn't come across well at all and maybe not even adequate enough to be a candidate at this point. Some are questioning whether he's even adequate enough to be president at this point. So while I think President Biden has done a tremendous job overall in saving the country from COVID and from a possible Great Depression, when everything was so bad and bleak, and he brought the unemployment rates down and the inflation rates down to some extent, all of that was positive. Investments in the infrastructure. He's done a good job, a lot of Democrats say, but now it's time for him to pass the torch to a younger generation.
Oh, absolutely.
So I don't know how it's going to go. Yeah, it's very important.
There's a lot of fit and healthy 81-year-olds who you would back in, but at the moment, and he's only getting older, isn't he? So you think of the next year and the year after that and the year after that. The other thing is Donald Trump wasn't much chop in the debate himself, was he really, if you look at it?
I think he got a pass because everyone's focused on Biden's poor performance overall, and Donald Trump was coming up with all the time 30 different documented falsehoods that he made claims, and he kept going smoothly across like he's making a speech, and he wouldn't even answer the questions that were asked him. So if people were to look at his performance in the debate, he would not have done very well either. But they were focused on Biden mainly, and that's not going to help Biden. It's going to help Trump overall. That's a real problem right now with the incumbent president.
I tell you what, this documentary series, this docudrama that's going to be made out of this year is probably about 10 parts at the moment, Peter. It's like nothing any of us have seen, I think.
We couldn't have imagined it and written up ourselves. You're right.
All right. Well, we'll talk real soon, no doubt. Of course, the election's in November. A lot of water to go under the bridge before then.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Tim.